The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Morrison Technologies headquarters as Catherine Morrison stood 42 floors above downtown Atlanta, watching the city blur through sheets of water. At 42, she had built an empire from nothing, a tech company that now employed over 4,000 people across 15 states. But tonight, as lightning illuminated her reflection in the glass, she felt the familiar weight of loneliness that success had brought her. "Mrs. Morrison?" Her assistant Jennifer's voice cut through her thoughts. "The Yamamoto delegation has arrived. They're waiting in conference room A." Catherine's stomach tightened. This was it, the moment 3 years of negotiations had led to. The contract with Yamamoto Industries would secure Morrison Technologies' expansion into Asian markets, a deal worth $75 million that would cement her company's position as a major player in the global technology sector. She adjusted her navy Armani blazer and picked up the leather portfolio containing the most important documents of her career. "Is everything ready? The presentation materials?" "There's been a problem," Jennifer interrupted, her usually steady voice wavering. Catherine froze. In 15 years of working together, Jennifer had never looked this pale. "What kind of problem?" "Dr. Williams, our Japanese interpreter, was in a car accident 40 minutes ago. He's in surgery at Atlanta General. The roads are completely flooded, and every translation service in the city is either closed for the holiday weekend or can't get anyone here in time." The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. Mr. Yamamoto spoke very little English, preferring to conduct all serious business negotiations in Japanese. Without proper translation, months of careful relationship building would collapse in minutes. "How long do we have?" Catherine asked, forcing her voice to remain calm. 15 minutes before they expect the formal presentation to begin." Catherine closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 4,000 jobs pressing down on her shoulders. She had clawed her way up from nothing, a girl from a working-class family in rural Georgia who had put herself through Georgia Tech by working 3 jobs. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every relationship that had crumbled under the pressure of her ambitions had led to this moment. "Keep calling translation services," she ordered. "Offer them anything, triple rates, emergency bonuses, whatever it takes. I'll go in and try to stall them somehow." As Jennifer hurried away, Catherine stood alone in the marble-floored lobby, watching her empire teeter on the edge of collapse. She had always been the one with the plan, the solution, the way forward. But tonight, for the first time in years, she felt truly helpless. Meanwhile, 3 floors below, David Chen pushed his cleaning cart down the 39th floor hallway, humming an old Beatles song under his breath. At 34, his hands showed the wear of manual labor, but his eyes held the quiet intelligence of someone who had once commanded lecture halls filled with eager students. He had been working the night shift at Morrison Technologies for 10 months now, invisible to most employees but grateful for the steady paycheck. The framed photograph tucked into his cart's top compartment showed a 7-year-old girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile, his daughter Emma, the reason he got up every morning and the light that kept him going through the darkest moments. David had arrived in Atlanta 2 years ago after losing his position as a professor of linguistics at UC Berkeley. Budget cuts, they had called it. Though he suspected his ethnicity and his criticism of the university's handling of diversity issues had made him an easy target. His wife Maria had died of cancer 3 years earlier, leaving him to raise Emma alone while fighting a mountain of medical debt. The move to Atlanta had been a fresh start, but PhD in applied linguistics meant nothing when you lacked the connections and political savvy necessary to navigate academic politics. So he cleaned offices, mopped floors, and saved every penny he could for Emma's future and for the medical bills that continued to arrive from her ongoing treatment for a congenital heart condition. As he worked, David could hear raised voices echoing from the 42nd floor conference rooms. He recognized the sound of stress, of deals falling apart, of people under pressure. During his academic career, he had spoken 7 languages fluent: English, Japanese, Mandarin, Korean, Spanish, French, and German skills he had developed during his research into cross-cultural communication patterns. But those abilities were just another part of his past life, as irrelevant in his current circumstances as his published papers on linguistic bridges in international business. David paused near the elevator bank, noticing an unusual amount of activity for this time of night. Through the glass doors of conference room A, he could see a group of well-dressed Japanese businessmen sitting around the mahogany table. their expressions growing more impatient by the minute. He recognized Mr. Yamamoto from previous visits, always polite, always leaving a small cash tip when David cleaned his temporary office. Tonight, though, the distinguished older man looked frustrated, checking his expensive watch repeatedly while speaking in rapid Japanese to his colleagues. "We have waited long enough," Mr. Yamamoto was saying in Japanese, his voice carrying the tone of finality. "If Morrison Technologies cannot provide basic professional courtesy, perhaps our time would be better spent elsewhere." David's hands stilled on his mop handle. He understood every word. Down the hall, he spotted Mrs. Morrison pacing near the main conference room, her usual confidence replaced by barely contained panic. He had observed her from a distance many times over the past 10 months, admiring her determination and the way she treated even the cleaning staff with basic respect and kindness that had stood out in his experience with corporate executives. But tonight, her composed mask was cracking. Through the glass wall, David watched as Mrs. Morrison entered the conference room with her assistant, her smile strained as she gestured apologetically to the Japanese delegation. Mr. Yamamoto's expression darkened as he realized the language barrier would prevent any meaningful communication. The businessman stood, gathering his papers with sharp, angry movements. "This is unprofessional," he said in Japanese to his team. "We will return to Tokyo tomorrow." Clearly, this company is not prepared for international business. David looked at Emma's photograph, then at the scene unfolding in the conference room. For 10 months, he had been invisible, accepting that his education and abilities didn't matter in his current circumstances. He had learned to keep his head down, cash his paychecks, and focus solely on his daughter's future. But watching this scene unfold, seeing opportunities slip away due to a simple communication gap, something stirred in his chest. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. "David, God gives us abilities not just for ourselves, but to help others when they need it most." The Japanese delegation was standing now, Mr. Yamamoto speaking firmly to his colleagues. "We will catch the next flight to Tokyo." This level of disorganization suggests this company is not ready for serious partnership. David glanced once more at Emma's photo, then at Mrs. Morrison's desperate face visible through the glass. Sometimes, he realized, staying invisible meant letting others fail when you had the power to help. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and made a decision that would change everything. David parked his cleaning cart in the hallway and walked quietly to the conference room entrance. Through the glass, he could see Catherine Morrison standing at the head of the table, her hands trembling slightly as she watched the Yamamoto delegation preparing to leave. "Excuse me, Mrs. Morrison," David said softly from the doorway. Catherine turned, her eyes widening with surprise at the interruption. Around the conference table, the Japanese businessmen paused their packing, curious about this unexpected development. "David, not now," Catherine said, trying to keep the desperation from her voice. "We're in the middle of—" "I can help," David said simply. "I speak Japanese." The words hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. Catherine stared at him, certain she had misheard. The Japanese executives exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from impatience to curiosity. "You." "What?" Catherine whispered. David stepped into the room, his presence somehow transforming from invisible maintenance worker to something else entirely. He looked directly at Mr. Yamamoto and spoke in perfect, fluent Japanese. "Honored Mr. Yamamoto, please forgive the confusion. Mrs. Morrison has the greatest respect for you and your company. She has prepared a presentation that will demonstrate significant benefits for both our organizations." Mr. Yamamoto's eyebrows shot up in surprise. He responded in rapid Japanese, his tone shifting from annoyance to intrigue. "You speak our language very well. Are you Morrison Technologies' interpreter?" David nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Catherine. "Mr. Yamamoto is impressed that Morrison Technologies employs people with diverse skills. He's willing to give you 30 minutes to present your proposal, but he requests that I serve as translator." Catherine felt her knees go weak with relief. She looked at David, really looked at him for the first time. Behind his humble custodian's uniform, she glimpsed something unexpected. Intelligence, education, and a quiet dignity that commanded respect. Can you really handle technical business translation?" she asked. David smiled, and for a moment, The harsh fluorescent lights seemed to soften around him. Mrs. Morrison, I have a PhD in applied linguistics from UC Berkeley. I've translated everything from academic papers to legal documents. Trust me. The word trust echoed in Catherine's mind. She had built her entire career on calculated risks and careful control. But standing in that conference room, watching her empire crumble, she realized that sometimes survival required the most dangerous gamble of all. Faith in another person. Gentlemen, she said, turning to face the Japanese delegation with renewed confidence, let's discuss the future. Mr. Yamamoto settled back into his chair, his stern expression replaced by genuine curiosity about this unexpected turn of events. David took his position beside Catherine, transforming from invisible janitor to the bridge between two worlds. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary. David translated with a precision and elegance that left both sides amazed. He didn't just convert words, she captured the subtle cultural nuances, the underlying meanings, the emotional undertones that made the difference between a contract and a true partnership. Mrs. Morrison wishes to emphasize that this collaboration represents more than financial gain, David explained to Mr. Yamamoto in Japanese. She sees it as building a bridge between two great business cultures, creating opportunities for mutual growth and understanding. Mr. Yamamoto's eyes lit up as he absorbed the translation. He responded enthusiastically, gesturing toward the financial projections spread across the table. Mr. Yamamoto says that in Japanese business philosophy, the greatest partnerships are built on mutual respect and shared vision for the future, David told Catherine. He's impressed by your company's commitment to quality and your personal dedication to understanding Japanese business values. Catherine found herself captivated not just by David's linguistic abilities, but by the way he seemed to understand both cultures intuitively. He anticipated questions, clarified complex terms, and even offered cultural context that helped both sides avoid potential misunderstandings. The manufacturing timeline concerns them, David explained privately to Catherine during a brief pause. In Japanese business culture, rushing suggests lack of proper planning. If you can emphasize the thorough preparation that went into these schedules, it will address their underlying concern. Catherine nodded, adjusting her presentation accordingly. As she spoke about Morrison Technology's careful approach to expansion, David's translation carried not just her words, but her conviction, her passion, her absolute commitment to excellence. Mr. Yamamoto's associate, Mrs. Tanaka, leaned forward and spoke in rapid Japanese. David listened intently, then smiled before translating. Mrs. Tanaka asks about your company's values regarding employee development and loyalty. She's noticed that you have someone of obvious education and ability working in an entry-level position, and she's curious about your commitment to recognizing talent within your organization. Catherine felt her cheeks flush. She glanced at David, seeing him in an entirely new light. Here was a man with obvious intelligence and education, working as a janitor because, why? What circumstances had led him to this position? Morrison Technologies has always believed that talent can be found anywhere, Catherine said carefully. We value dedication, intelligence, and character above all else. Sometimes our most valuable employees are the ones who start in unexpected places. David's translation of her response carried additional weight, and Catherine could see the approval in the Japanese executive's expressions. Mr. Yamamoto nodded approvingly, speaking at length in Japanese. Mr. Yamamoto says that a company's true character is revealed by how it treats all its employees, not just those in executive positions. David translated, he's impressed that Morrison Technologies recognizes value in unexpected places. This gives him confidence in your company's judgment and character. As the meeting progressed, Catherine began to see David differently. This wasn't just about his language skill. She possessed an emotional intelligence, a cultural sensitivity, and a natural diplomatic ability that had transformed a potential disaster into something approaching magic. Mrs. Morrison, Mr. Yamamoto said in careful English as the formal negotiations concluded, your translator is a very special person. You are lucky to have such talent in your company. Catherine looked at David, still standing quietly beside her, humble despite having just saved her empire. For the first time in years, she felt something beyond professional satisfaction. She felt genuine gratitude and curiosity about another human being. The contracts were signed as the Atlanta skyline sparkled through the cleared windows, the storm having passed during their 3-hour negotiation. Yamamoto Industries would invest $75 million in Morrison Technologies' Asian expansion, with David Chen designated as the primary cultural liaison for all future communications. As the Japanese delegation prepared to leave, Mr. Yamamoto approached David directly. "Chen-san," he said in Japanese, "you have brought great honor to yourself and your company tonight. I hope we will work together closely in the months ahead." David bowed respectfully, responding in Japanese, "The honor is mine, Yamamoto-san. I look forward to building a lasting partnership between our companies." After the delegation departed, Catherine stood alone with David in the conference room, both of them processing what had just occurred. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions and newfound respect. "David," Catherine said finally, "I need to understand what just happened here. Who are you really?" David's composure wavered slightly. For 10 months he had been invisible, just another face in the crowd of service workers who kept the corporate world running. Now, suddenly, he was visible, perhaps more visible than he was comfortable being. "I'm just someone who happened to be in the right place at the right time," he said quietly. "No," Catherine said firmly. "That wasn't luck. That was expertise, education, and cultural understanding that saved my company. I need to know, what are you doing working as a janitor when you clearly have abilities that could benefit any organization?" David looked down at his hands, weathered from months of manual labor. "Sometimes life doesn't give you the choices you want, Mrs. Morrison. Sometimes you do what you have to do to survive and take care of the people you love." Catherine felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of shared struggle and sacrifice. "Tell me about your daughter," she said gently. David's entire demeanor softened. "Emma. She's 7, in 2nd grade at Riverside Elementary. Bright as a star, wants to be a doctor when she grows up." He pulled out his phone, showing Catherine a recent photo of a beautiful little girl with bright eyes and a radiant smile. "And her mother?" "Gone," David said simply. "Cancer. 3 years ago. It's been just Emma and me since then." Catherine studied this man who had transformed her crisis into triumph while carrying his own heavy burdens. "David, you saved my company tonight. That deal with Yamamoto Industries is worth $75 million. Why didn't you tell me about your background, your education?" David looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "Mrs. Morrison, in your world, I'm invisible. A janitor with an accent and a complicated history. I learned it's easier to keep my head down, do my job, and focus on giving Emma a better future than I had." "What you used to be," Catherine leaned forward. "What were you before you came here?" "Professor of Applied Linguistics at UC Berkeley," David said, his voice carrying a trace of the pride he had once known. "I specialized in cross-cultural communication and international business language. Published research on linguistic bridges between different business cultures." Catherine felt something crack open in her chest. Here was a man with remarkable abilities, working night shifts, cleaning floors, all to provide for his daughter. Meanwhile, she had been surrounded by highly paid consultants and advisors who couldn't solve a simple translation crisis. "David," she said carefully, "what if I told you that could change?" He looked up, hope flickering in his dark eyes before caution took over. "Mrs. Morrison, I appreciate the thought, but—" "No," she interrupted. "What if I told you that Morrison Technologies is about to expand internationally, and we need someone who understands not just languages but cultures? Someone who can build bridges between different business worlds?" David stared at her, hardly daring to breathe. "I'm offering you a position as Director of International Communications," Catherine continued. "Full benefits, competitive salary, and most importantly," she paused, seeing tears gathering in David's eyes, "a chance to use all those abilities you've been hiding." David sat in stunned silence, processing words he had never dared to dream he would hear. Director of International Communications. It sounded like something from another lifetime, from the world he had lost when his wife died and his career crumbled. "Mrs. Morrison, I don't know what to say," he whispered. "Say yes," Catherine replied, surprised by the emotion in her own voice. "David, tonight you didn't just translate words, you translated dreams, aspirations, cultural values. You turned a potential disaster into the foundation of something beautiful. That's not just skill, that's a gift. David thought of Emma, probably asleep in their small apartment, her homework spread across their kitchen table. He thought of the nights he had worked double shifts to pay for her medical bills, the dreams he had set aside to ensure her future. Now suddenly his own dreams were being handed back to him. The salary? He began hesitantly. $95,000 to start, with performance bonuses tied to successful international partnerships. Health insurance for both you and Emma, education fund for her college, and Catherine paused, watching his reaction. A signing bonus to help you get settled in your new role. David's hands trembled. In 10 months of janitorial work, he had saved barely $4,000 toward Emma's medical expenses. This opportunity would transform not just his life, but Emma's entire future. There's one condition, Catherine continued. Yamamoto Industries specifically requested that you handle all future communications with their company. They were so impressed with your cultural sensitivity that they want you personally involved in the partnership development. They asked for me specifically? David's voice broke slightly. David, you made them feel understood. In international business, that's worth more than gold. Catherine stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. You know, I built this company by recognizing talent wherever I found it, but somehow I almost missed the most talented person in my own building. David rose from his chair, squaring his shoulders with new purpose. Mrs. Morrison, if you're serious about this offer, I promise you won't regret it. I'll work harder than anyone to justify your faith in me. I know you will, Catherine said, turning back to face him. But David, I need you to understand something. This isn't charity. You earned this opportunity the moment you stepped into that conference room and saved my company. You have abilities that can't be taught: cultural intuition, linguistic precision, and something even rarer, the courage to step forward when others need help. As David left the Morrison Technologies building that night, he walked with a different stride, no longer the invisible janitor, but not yet comfortable in his new identity. In the elevator, he called Emma's babysitter to let her know he would be late, then sat in his car in the parking garage, staring at his phone. Emma would be asleep by now, but tomorrow he would have news that would change both their lives forever. Outside, the Atlanta skyline sparkled with possibility, and for the first time in years, David Chen dared to believe that dreams could actually come true. But neither he nor Catherine could anticipate the challenges that lay ahead, or how deeply their professional relationship would evolve into something neither of them expected. 3 days later, Catherine stood in her corner office, holding David's personnel filia thin folder that contained almost nothing about the man who had saved her company. The basic information was there. David Chen, age 34, hired as night maintenance staff 10 months ago. Emergency contact listed as Emma Chen, age 7. Previous address in Berkeley, California. What it didn't contain was the story of the man who had transformed her crisis into triumph. Jennifer, she called to her assistant, ask David Chen to come to my office when he arrives for his shift tonight. And Jennifer, have HR prepare a new employment contract for Director of International Communications. Jennifer looked puzzled. The janitor? Is there a problem with his work? No problem at all, Catherine said softly. Quite the opposite. That evening, David knocked on Catherine's office door, wearing a simple button-down shirt and khakis instead of his usual work uniform. Behind him, the Morrison Technologies building buzzed with the energy of a company preparing for international expansion. You wanted to see me, Mrs. Morrison? His voice held the same respectful tone he had always used, but now she heard the education and intelligence beneath it. Sit down, David. Catherine gestured to the leather chair across from her desk. We need to talk about your future. David perched on the edge of the chair, clearly still adjusting to being in the executive suite as anything other than a cleaning person. Catherine noticed his hands strong, work-worn, but steady. The hands of a man who had never stopped fighting for what mattered most. I've been thinking about what you said the other night, Catherine began, about doing what you have to do to survive and take care of the people you love. I understand that more than you might realize. David looked up, surprised by the personal tone. I built this company from nothing, Catherine continued. Started in a garage apartment, living on ramen noodles and determination. I sacrificed everything: relationships, friendships, any semblance of a normal life to make Morrison Technologies successful. But success without someone to share it with, It's empty. She stood and walked to her window, looking out at the city lights. I've been alone for so long, I forgot what it felt like to have someone genuinely care about something I cared about. The other night, watching you save my company, I realized I had been missing something essential. Mrs. Morrison. Catherine, she said, turning back to him. I think we're beyond formalities now, don't you? David nodded slowly. Catherine, I want you to know that what I did wasn't about getting ahead or positioning myself for advancement. I couldn't stand by and watch something important fall apart when I had the ability to help. I know, Catherine said, settling back into her chair. That's exactly why I know you're the right person for this position. David, I need someone I can trust completely. Someone who understands that business isn't just about profit, it's about people, relationships, and building something meaningful. She slid a contract across the desk. This is your formal offer. Director of International Communications, reporting directly to me. Your office will be on the 40th floor with a full support staff and travel budget for international partnerships. David stared at the contract, his hands trembling slightly as he read the terms. The salary was more than he had ever imagined earning. The benefits package would cover Emma's medical expenses completely. The signing bonus would eliminate his remaining debt and provide security he had never dared to dream of. There's something else, Catherine said quietly. Emma's medical condition, I did some research. Children's Healthcare of Atlanta has one of the best pediatric cardiology programs in the country. As part of your benefits package, she'll have access to the finest specialists available. David's composure finally cracked. Tears welled in his eyes as the magnitude of what Catherine was offering hit him fully. This wasn't just a job, it was a complete transformation of his and Emma's lives. Why, he whispered, why are you doing this for me? Catherine was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. Because I recognize something in you that I've been missing in my own life. Integrity, compassion, the ability to see what really matters. You could have stayed invisible, David. You could have let my company fail and gone home to your daughter without anyone ever knowing you had the power to help. But you didn't. You stepped forward when it mattered most. David wiped his eyes, struggling to maintain his composure. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me yet, Catherine said with a smile. This is going to be the hardest job you've ever had. International business is complicated, demanding, and unforgiving. You'll be traveling constantly, managing relationships across multiple cultures, and representing Morrison Technologies in situations where millions of dollars depend on your judgment. I won't let you down, David said, his voice steady with determination. I know you won't. But David, I need you to understand something important. This partnership, because that's what this is, a partnership that's going to change both our lives in ways we can't predict. Are you ready for that? David looked at the contract one more time, then at Catherine's face, seeing something in her eyes that went beyond professional respect. There was a connection there, a recognition of shared values and mutual understanding that felt like the beginning of something significant. I'm ready, he said, signing the contract with firm, confident strokes. As David left Catherine's office that night, he felt like he was walking into an entirely new life. The invisible janitor was gone, replaced by someone with purpose, opportunity, and for the first time in years, hope for the future. But the most significant change was yet to come, a transformation that would test both his and Catherine's abilities to balance professional success with personal feelings that neither of them had anticipated. 2 weeks into his new role, David sat in his spacious office on the 40th floor, still marveling at the view of Atlanta spread out below him. The mahogany desk, the leather chairs, the respect in colleagues' voices when they addressed him as Director Cheney all felt surreal. But the adjustment hadn't been without challenges. Some executives questioned Catherine's decision to promote the janitor, whispering doubts about his qualifications despite his obvious success with Yamamoto Industries. David felt their skeptical stares during board meetings, heard the subtle condescension in their voices when they thought he wasn't listening. Papa, your office is bigger than our whole apartment, Emma exclaimed during her first visit, spinning in his leather chair with pure joy. At 7, she adapted to their improved circumstances with the resilience of childhood. They had moved to a better neighborhood. She attended a private school with excellent special education resources for her heart condition, and David could afford the medical care that had once seemed impossible. But David worried about the changes, the pressure of his new responsibilities, the long hours, the travel that took him away from Emma. Success, he was learning, came with its own complications. Catherine had been nothing but supportive, personally introducing him to key clients and defending his expertise when others questioned it. But David sensed something deeper in her attention, a loneliness that mirrored his own, a shared understanding of sacrifice and ambition. The intercom buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. "Mr. Chen, Mrs. Morrison would like to see you in her office." David found Catherine pacing behind her desk, tension radiating from her normally composed demeanor. Financial reports were scattered across her workspace, and her usually perfect appearance showed signs of stress. "David, we have a problem," she said without preamble. David's stomach dropped. In the 2 weeks since his promotion, everything had been going smoothly. Yamamoto Industries was thrilled with their partnership, and preliminary negotiations with 2 other Asian companies were progressing well. "What's happened?" he asked, settling into the familiar chair across from her desk. "Harrison Industries," Catherine said, her voice tight with frustration. "They're mounting a hostile takeover attempt. They've been buying up shares quietly for months, and they just announced their intention to acquire Morrison Technologies." David felt the blood drain from his face. Harrison Industries was one of the largest tech conglomerates in the country, known for acquiring smaller companies and stripping them for parts. If they succeeded in taking over Morrison Technologies, thousands of jobs would be lost, including his own. "How much time do we have?" he asked. 4 weeks. That's when the shareholders vote. Harrison is offering 30% above market value. It's going to be very tempting for our investors. Catherine collapsed into her chair, looking more vulnerable than David had ever seen her. "I built this company from nothing, David. It's not just a business, it's a family. These people trust me to protect their livelihoods, their futures." David studied her face, seeing the weight of responsibility she carried. "What can we do?" "Fight," Catherine said, her voice gaining strength. "We need to prove to our shareholders that Morrison Technologies is worth more as an independent company than as part of Harrison's empire. We need to show them that our international expansion, our partnerships, our future growth potential outweigh Harrison's immediate cash offer." "The Yamamoto partnership is just the beginning," David said, his mind racing. "I have contacts in Korea, Germany, Brazil. If we can accelerate our international expansion, show concrete evidence of future growth—" "Exactly," Catherine interrupted. "But David, this means accelerating everything. You'd be traveling constantly, negotiating multiple deals simultaneously. It's going to be intense." David thought of Emma, of the promise he had made to himself to be more present in her life. But he also thought of Catherine, of the 4,000 employees who depended on Morrison Technologies for their livelihoods, of the opportunity to build something meaningful. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Catherine's expression softened with gratitude. "I need you to work miracles, David. I need you to build partnerships that will make Harrison's offer look like pocket change." "Consider it done," David said, standing with renewed determination. "When do we start?" "Now," Catherine said. "I've already booked you a flight to Seoul. Kim Electronics has agreed to meet with you tomorrow about a potential partnership. If you can close that deal, it could be worth $50 million over 5 years." As David prepared to leave, Catherine called his name. "David, thank you for everything. I know this isn't what you signed up for when you took this job." "Actually," David said, pausing at the door, "this is exactly what I signed up for. The chance to build something important with someone I trust completely." Their eyes met across the office, and for a moment, professional boundaries seemed to dissolve into something deeper, more personal. Both of them felt it, the connection that had been building since that night in the conference room, the partnership that was becoming something more than either had anticipated. But there was no time to explore those feelings. Harrison Industries was circling like vultures, and the battle for Morrison Technologies' survival was just beginning. As David packed for Seoul that night, Emma helped him fold his shirts, chattering about her day at school. "Papa, are you going to be traveling a lot now?" David paused, looking at his daughter's serious face. "For a while, yes. But it's important work, Emma. We're building something special. Will you call me every day?" "Every single day," David promised, hugging her close. "And when this is all over, we'll take a vacation together, just you and me." Emma smiled, but David could see the worry in her eyes. At 7, she had already learned not to count on promises about the future. As his plane lifted off from Atlanta the next morning, David stared out at the city lights fading below. Somewhere down there, Catherine was probably still in her office, working late into the night, fighting for the company that had become her life's work. He pulled out his phone and sent her a text. "On my way to Seoul. We're going to win this." Her response came immediately. "I know we will. Be safe." David smiled, feeling the connection between them even across the distance. They were partners in this fight, and together they would find a way to save Morrison Technologies. But neither of them could predict how the battle ahead would change not just their company, but their relationship, in ways that would challenge everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and the price of success. The war for Morrison Technologies had begun, and David Chen was flying into the heart of it, carrying with him the hopes and dreams of everyone who called the company home. The neon lights of Seoul's Gangnam district painted the night sky in brilliant colors as David Chen stood at the window of his hotel room, reviewing his notes for the morning's crucial meeting with Kim Electronics. 3 weeks had passed since Harrison Industries announced their hostile takeover bid, and David had been living out of suitcases, flying from one international negotiation to another in a desperate race against time. His phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "How are you holding up?" "The board meeting is in 5 days." David typed back, tired but determined. "Kim Electronics meeting is at 9 a.m. If this goes well, we'll have the momentum we need." "I believe in you," came her immediate response, followed by a pause. Then, "Miss having you here." David stared at the message, feeling the weight of emotions he had been trying to suppress. Over the past 3 weeks, their professional partnership had deepened into something more intimate late-night phone calls that stretched beyond business, shared moments of vulnerability when the pressure seemed overwhelming, and a growing awareness that they were becoming essential to each other's lives. But there was no time for personal feelings. Tomorrow's meeting with Kim Electronics could determine the fate of Morrison Technologies. David's phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Emma's face appeared on the screen, her gap-toothed smile providing a moment of pure joy in his stressful world. "Papa, how's Korea? Did you eat any of that spicy food you told me about?" David smiled, settling into the hotel room chair. "I did, Mija. It's called kimchi, and it's very spicy." "How was school today?" "Good." Mrs. Patterson said I'm the best reader in my class. "And guess what? Miss Catherine came to see me today." David's heart stopped. "She did?" "Yes. She picked me up from school and took me to get ice cream. She said you're working very hard to help lots of people keep their jobs." "She's really nice, Papa. I like her." David's throat tightened with emotion. Catherine had driven across town to spend time with his daughter, making sure Emma didn't feel abandoned while he traveled the world fighting for their company's survival. "Did you have fun with Miss Catherine?" "So much fun. She told me about all the countries you're visiting, and she showed me pictures on her phone." "Papa, she has really pretty eyes when she smiles. Do you think she likes us?" The innocent question hit David like a physical blow. "I think she cares about us very much, Emma." "Good. I hope she comes to see me again soon. I want to show her my science project about the heart." After ending the call, David sat in the darkness of his hotel room, overwhelmed by the complexity of his feelings. Catherine's gesture, taking time from her impossibly busy schedule to comfort his daughter, revealed a depth of caring that went far beyond professional courtesy. He was falling in love with her, and from her recent messages and actions, he suspected she might be feeling the same way. But the timing couldn't be worse. With Harrison Industries circling and the company's future hanging in the balance, any personal relationship would be a dangerous distraction. David forced himself to focus on the Kim Electronics presentation, reviewing cultural protocols and rehearsing his opening remarks in Korean. Tomorrow's meeting would determine whether Morrison Technologies survived as an independent company or became another casualty of corporate greed. The next morning, David arrived at Kim Electronics headquarters in downtown Seoul, his confidence bolstered by weeks of intensive preparation. The building was a gleaming tower of glass and steel, representing the kind of technological innovation that Morrison Technologies hoped to partner with. Mr. Kim Jae-sung, the company's CEO, was a distinguished man in his 50s who had built his electronics empire from a small family business. His reputation for shrewd negotiation was legendary, but David had learned that he valued personal relationships and cultural respect above pure financial considerations. Mr. Chen, Kim said in accented English, his handshake firm and measuring. I am curious to meet the man who has caused such excitement in international business circles. Your work with Yamamoto Industries has been noted throughout Asia. David bowed respectfully, then responded in fluent Korean. The honor is mine, Mr. Kim. I come with great respect for your company's innovation and integrity. Kim's eyebrows rose with surprise and approval. Your Korean is excellent. Please, let us speak in my language. It will make our discussion more authentic. Over the next 4 hours, David carefully presented Morrison Technologies' vision for Asian expansion, emphasizing the company's commitment to long-term partnerships rather than short-term profit extraction. He spoke about Catherine's leadership philosophy, the company's employee-first culture, and their dedication to technological innovation that served human needs. Mr. Chen, Kim said during a break in negotiations, you speak of your CEO with great respect. Tell me, what kind of leader is Catherine Morrison? David chose his words carefully, aware that his answer could influence the entire negotiation. She is a visionary who never forgot where she came from. She built Morrison Technologies by recognizing talent regardless of its source and treating every employee as family. She saw potential in me when others saw only limitations. Kim nodded thoughtfully. In Korean business culture, we believe that a leader's character is revealed by how they treat those with less power. Your presence here, representing her company with such skill and dedication, speaks well of her judgment. The final breakthrough came when David shared Morrison Technologies' employee profit-sharing program and their commitment to maintaining jobs rather than maximizing shareholder returns. Kim Electronics had been burned by American companies that promised partnership but delivered only exploitation. This is different, Kim said finally. Your company thinks like a Korean company: long-term relationships, employee loyalty, shared success. Kim Electronics will invest $40 million in Morrison Technologies with a commitment to joint development projects over the next decade. David felt his knees go weak with relief. The deal was worth more than Harrison Industries' immediate offer, and it demonstrated the kind of future growth potential that could convince shareholders to reject the hostile takeover. As they shook hands on the agreement, Kim offered an unexpected personal observation. Mr. Chen, you carry yourself like a man in love. I hope she knows how fortunate she is to have such devoted representation. David's cheeks flushed. I'm not sure I understand, Mr. Kim. A man negotiates differently when he is fighting for someone he loves, not just something he values. Your passion for Morrison Technologies is obvious, but your passion for Catherine Morrison is equally clear. Take care that you do not lose sight of personal happiness in pursuit of business success. The words followed David throughout his long flight back to Atlanta. Kim's observation had been uncomfortably accurate. He was fighting for Catherine as much as for the company, and the distinction between professional and personal loyalty had become impossibly blurred. David arrived in Atlanta to find the city buzzing with news of the Kim Electronics partnership. The business press was calling it a stunning reversal that had shifted momentum away from Harrison Industries. Morrison Technologies' stock price had jumped 15% in a single day. Catherine met him at the airport, her face radiant with exhaustion and triumph. David, you did it. The Kim deal changes everything. The board is reconsidering Harrison's offer. They embraced spontaneously, holding each other longer than professional courtesy required. David breathed in her familiar perfume, feeling the warmth of her body against his, and realized that coming home to her felt more natural than anything he had ever experienced. I have more news, Catherine said as they drove through Atlanta traffic. Emma is fine, but she had a small episode at school yesterday. Nothing serious, but the doctor wants to run some additional tests on her heart. David's stomach dropped. What kind of episode? She got dizzy during gym class and had to sit down. The school nurse called me when they couldn't reach you. I took her to Children's Health Care, and Dr. Martinez says it's probably just a minor irregularity, but he wants to be cautious. David felt overwhelmed by gratitude and guilt. Catherine had stepped in to care for his daughter while he was thousands of miles away, handling a crisis that should have been his responsibility. Catherine, I can't thank you enough. I should have been here. Stop, she said firmly. You were fighting for our future. Emma understands that. She's proud of you, David. We both are. The word "we" hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. They were becoming a unit, a family, though neither had acknowledged it directly. At the hospital, David found Emma in the pediatric cardiology unit, looking small in the hospital bed but smiling when she saw him. "Papa," Miss Catherine said, "you made friends with people in Korea." "I did, Miha, and I brought you something special." David pulled out a small Korean doll dressed in traditional hanbok clothing. "This is called a jeogori. Korean children play with dolls like this." Emma hugged the doll close, then looked seriously at her father. "Papa, I like Miss Catherine a lot. She stayed with me the whole time yesterday, and she read me stories about princesses who run companies." David glanced at Catherine, who was standing quietly near the window, and felt his heart swell with an emotion he had been trying to suppress. This woman had not only saved his career, but had become a second mother to his daughter. Dr. Martinez entered with test results. "Good news, Emma. Your heart is working perfectly well. The dizziness was probably just from growing so fast, but we want to keep monitoring you closely." "What does that mean?" David asked. "Regular checkups, some lifestyle modifications, and eventually, when she's older, we may need to consider a minor procedure to strengthen one of her heart valves. Nothing dangerous, but it will require careful planning and the best possible care." David felt the familiar weight of medical expenses, but Catherine squeezed his hand reassuringly. "Emma has the best insurance in the city now," she said quietly. "Whatever she needs, we'll make sure she gets it." The casual way Catherine said "we" made David realize how naturally she had become part of their family. Emma adored her and David. David was falling deeper in love with her every day. 3 days later, the Morrison Technologies board meeting would determine the company's fate. David and Catherine worked around the clock, preparing presentations that would convince shareholders to reject Harrison's offer in favor of long-term growth through international partnerships. "We need to show them that we're not just fighting a takeover," Catherine said during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "We're building something unprecedented, a truly global company that maintains its soul." David looked up from his laptop, studying Catherine's face in the soft light of her office. She had been working 18-hour days for weeks, sustained by coffee and determination. Her usually perfect appearance showed signs of strain, but to David, she had never looked more beautiful. "Catherine," he said softly, "what happens after we win?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, once we defeat Harrison Industries, once the international expansion is secure, what happens to this?" He gestured between them. "What happens to us?" Catherine's composure wavered. For weeks, they had been dancing around their growing feelings, using the crisis as an excuse to avoid confronting the complexity of their relationship. "I don't know," she admitted. "David, I care about you more than I've ever cared about anyone. But I'm also your boss, and Emma depends on both of us for stability. What if we're wrong about this? What if personal feelings complicate everything we've built?" David stood and walked to where she sat, kneeling beside her chair. "Catherine, the night I stepped into that conference room to help you, I wasn't thinking about career advancement or personal gain. I was thinking about doing what was right. This," he took her hand, "this feels right too." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "David, I've been alone for so long. I've convinced myself that success required sacrifice, that I couldn't have both professional achievement and personal happiness. But with you, I feel like maybe I was wrong." "You weren't wrong to be cautious," David said, "but you also don't have to choose between success and love. We can have both." Before Catherine could respond, David's phone rang. Emma's school appeared on the caller ID, and both of them tensed. "Mr. Chen?" The voice belonged to the school nurse. "I'm calling about Emma. She's collapsed during lunch, and we've called an ambulance. She's conscious but having trouble breathing." David felt the world tilt. "We'll be right there." Catherine was already grabbing her keys. "Let's go." They raced through Atlanta traffic, both of them silent with fear. At the hospital, they found Emma in the emergency room, oxygen mask over her small face, but her eyes alert and frightened. "Papa!" she called out weakly when she saw them. Dr. Martinez approached with a serious expression. "Emma's heart is under stress. We need to move up the timeline for her procedure. I recommend surgery within the next 2 weeks." "Surgery?" David felt his knees go weak. "It's a relatively routine procedure, but it requires a specialized surgical team and extensive post-operative care. The cost will be significant, but with Emma's insurance coverage, it should be manageable. David held Emma's hand, overwhelmed by the complexity of his situation. His daughter needed surgery, his company was fighting for survival, and he was falling in love with a woman whose world was far removed from his own struggles. "Papa," Emma whispered, "is Miss Catherine going to stay with us?" David looked at Catherine, who was wiping tears from her eyes. "She's going to stay as long as she wants to, Mija." "Good," Emma said, her voice growing stronger. "I want her to be part of our family." The simple honesty of a 7-year-old's perspective cut through all their adult complications. Catherine took Emma's other hand, and the three of them formed a circle around the hospital bed. "I want that too," Catherine said softly. "I want to be part of your family." David felt tears streaming down his face. In a hospital room, surrounded by the chaos of medical emergency, he had found something he had never expected: a complete family, bound together by love that transcended professional boundaries and social conventions. The board meeting was tomorrow, but suddenly that seemed less important than the promise he saw in Catherine's eyes and the trust he felt in Emma's small hand. Whatever happened with Harrison Industries, whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. But as David held his daughter and looked at the woman he loved, he had no idea that the greatest test of their relationship was still to come: a revelation that would challenge everything they thought they knew about each other and force them to choose between love and loyalty in ways they never imagined. The next morning, David stood in the Morrison Technologies boardroom, watching shareholders file in for the meeting that would determine the company's fate. Catherine sat at the head of the table, composed and confident despite the exhaustion that showed in her eyes. Emma was stable at the hospital, her surgery scheduled for the following week, and both David and Catherine had spent the night at her bedside. "Ladies and gentlemen," Catherine began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had built an empire from nothing, "today we decide not just the fate of Morrison Technologies, but the future of everyone who calls this company home." The presentation was flawless. David detailed the international partnerships he had secured, the revenue projections for the next 5 years, and the strategic advantages of remaining independent. The Kim Electronics deal alone demonstrated growth potential that far exceeded Harrison Industries' immediate offer. But the real turning point came when Catherine spoke about company culture and employee loyalty. "Harrison Industries sees Morrison Technologies as assets to be acquired and optimized," she said. "But we are not assets, we are people. We are families. We are a community that has built something meaningful together." She gestured to David. 6 months ago, David Chen was working as a janitor in this building. Today, he is our Director of International Communications, having secured over $100 million in partnership agreements. This is what Morrison Technologies represents: the recognition that talent exists everywhere, and that our strength comes from seeing potential where others see only limitations. The vote was closer than anyone expected. But when the final tally was announced, Morrison Technologies shareholders had rejected Harrison's offer by a margin of 52 to 48%. The company would remain independent, guided by the international expansion strategy that David and Catherine had developed together. As the boardroom emptied, David and Catherine stood alone, processing their victory. They had saved the company, but the cost had been enormous: weeks of stress, constant travel, and the postponement of any personal relationship while they fought for their professional survival. "We did it," Catherine said, collapsing into her chair with exhaustion. "We did," David agreed. "But Catherine, we need to talk about what comes next." Before she could respond, Catherine's assistant Jennifer appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Morrison, there's someone here to see you. He says it's urgent." A tall, distinguished man in his 60s entered the boardroom, his expensive suit and confident bearing marking him as someone accustomed to power and influence. David immediately disliked him, sensing an arrogance that reminded him of the academic administrators who had destroyed his career at Berkeley. "Catherine," the man said, his voice carrying a slight Southern accent, "congratulations on your victory, though I suspect it may be short-lived." Catherine's face went pale. "What are you doing here, Richard?" "Richard?" David looked between them, confused by the tension in the room. "David," Catherine said quietly, "this is Richard Blackwood. I'm her father," Richard interrupted, his cold eyes studying David with obvious disdain. "And you, I assume, are the janitor who's been causing all this trouble." David felt the blood drain from his face. Catherine had never mentioned her father, and the surname difference had never prompted him to ask about her family. But seeing them together, the resemblance was obvious, the same strong jaw, the same intelligent eyes, though Richards held none of Catherine's warmth. David is our Director of International Communications, Catherine said firmly, and he's the reason Morrison Technologies is still independent. Richard laughed, but there was no humor in it. Catherine, you always were naive about people's motivations. This man has played you perfectly, the humble janitor with hidden talents, the devoted single father, the cultural bridge builder. It's quite a performance. That's enough, Catherine said, standing with barely controlled anger. David's contributions to this company are beyond question. Are they? Richard pulled out a thick folder. I've done some research on your Mr. Chen. Did you know that he was fired from UC Berkeley for inappropriate conduct with a student? That his wife left him before she died because of his drinking problem? That he's been lying about his credentials and his past? David felt the world spinning around him. That's not true, isn't it? Richard's voice was cold with satisfaction. Maria Chen filed for divorce 3 months before her death, citing emotional abuse and alcoholism. The student complaint at Berkeley was sealed, but I have connections. And those glowing references from his previous academic work, all falsified. Catherine turned to David, her face a mask of confusion and hurt. David, tell me this isn't true. David's throat closed with panic. The truth was complicated, messy, and easily misunderstood. Maria had filed for divorce during a particularly dark period of his life, when her medical expenses had driven him to desperation and depression. The student complaint had been vindictive and baseless, but it had been enough to destroy his career. He had never lied about his credentials, but he had omitted the painful details of his professional downfall. Catherine, I can explain. Can you? Richard's voice was triumphant. Or will you continue the deception that has already cost my daughter her professional reputation? Do you think the business community won't notice that Morrison Technologies' international expansion is built on the expertise of a disgraced academic and confirmed liar? Catherine sank back into her chair, overwhelmed by the complexity of her emotions. She had trusted David completely, built her company's future on his abilities, and allowed him into her personal life. If even part of what her father was saying was true, then everything she believed about David was a lie. I think you should leave, she said quietly, not looking at David. Catherine, please. Leave, she repeated, her voice breaking. I need time to process this. David stood frozen, watching the woman he loved retreat behind the professional mask she had worn for years. The connection they had built, the trust they had developed, the future they had begun to imagine, all of it was crumbling because of Richard's calculated attack. This isn't over, David said, his voice steady despite his breaking heart. Catherine, you know who I am. You know what we've built together. Don't let him destroy something real because of his twisted version of my past. As David left the boardroom, he heard Richard's voice. Catherine, I'm doing this to protect you. This man is not who you think he is. But David knew that Richard Blackwood had his own agenda, and that Catherine's father was about to reveal the real reason for his sudden appearance, a revelation that would make the current crisis seem simple by comparison. Outside Morrison Technologies, David sat in his car, staring at the building where he had found purpose, respect, and love. Now all of it was threatened by a man who seemed to know exactly how to destroy everything David had built. His phone buzzed with a text from the hospital. Emma asking for you and Miss Catherine. When will you be here? David closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the complexity of his situation. His daughter needed surgery. The woman he loved was questioning everything she thought she knew about him, and his professional future was suddenly uncertain. But Emma was depending on him, and whatever happened between him and Catherine, he would not let his daughter down. As he drove toward the hospital, David began to plan his response to Richard Blackwood's attack. The truth was complicated, but it was still the truth. And if Catherine was the woman he believed her to be, she would listen to his explanation and judge him based on her own experience, not her father's manipulations. The battle for Morrison Technologies was over, but the fight for his family was just beginning. At the hospital, Emma was sitting up in bed, her face bright with excitement. Papa! Miss Catherine said we won. She said the bad people can't take away your job. David's heart clenched. That's right, Mija. We won. Where is Miss Catherine? I want to show her my new doll. David struggled to find words that wouldn't frighten his daughter. She's very busy right now. but she'll come see you soon. Emma's face fell. Papa, you look sad. Are you and Miss Catherine fighting? The perceptiveness of children never ceased to amaze David. We're just working through some problems, Emma. Sometimes adults have to have difficult conversations. But you still love her, right? And she still loves us? David's eyes filled with tears. I love her very much, Mija, and I believe she loves us too. But sometimes love isn't enough to solve every problem. Mama used to say that love is like a bridge, Emma said seriously. Even when there are storms, the bridge is still there. You just have to wait for the weather to clear. David hugged his daughter close, amazed by her wisdom. Mama was very smart. Papa, will you fix things with Miss Catherine? I want her to be here when I have my surgery. I'm going to try, Mija. I'm going to try very hard. That evening, David received a call from Catherine. Her voice was distant, professional, but he could hear the pain beneath the surface. David, I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning. We need to discuss your future with Morrison Technologies. Catherine, please let me explain. Tomorrow morning, she repeated, 9 o'clock. As David hung up, he realized that the next 24 hours would determine not just his professional future, but whether the family he had found with Catherine and Emma would survive the storm that Richard Blackwood had unleashed. The truth was about to come out, but David wasn't sure if the truth would be enough to rebuild the trust that had been shattered by a father's cruel manipulations. Meanwhile, in her penthouse apartment, Catherine sat staring out at the Atlanta skyline, holding the folder of accusations against David. Part of her wanted to throw it away unread, to trust her instincts about the man who had saved her company and captured her heart. But another part of her, the part that had learned to be suspicious of anyone who seemed too good to be true, whispered that maybe her father was right. Maybe David had been playing a long game, using her feelings against her for his own benefit. The truth was somewhere in between, but Catherine would have to decide whether love was worth the risk of being wrong. As the lights of Atlanta twinkled below, two people who had found something precious were about to discover whether their connection was strong enough to survive the revelation of painful truths and the machinations of a man who seemed determined to destroy their happiness. The morning would bring answers, but it would also bring the greatest test of trust that either of them had ever faced. David Chen stood outside Morrison Technologies headquarters at 8:45 a.m., watching the morning sun reflect off the glass facade of the building that had become his second home. In 15 minutes, he would face Catherine Morrison and learn whether the accusations her father had leveled against him would destroy everything they had built together. He had spent the sleepless night preparing for this moment, gathering documents, organizing his thoughts, and rehearsing explanations for the painful chapters of his past that he had hoped never to revisit. The truth was complicated, messy, and easily misunderstood, but it was still the truth. Emma was scheduled for surgery in 3 days, and she had asked him repeatedly when Miss Catherine would come to visit. David had promised his daughter that he would fix things, but standing in the shadow of the building where he had found love and purpose, he wasn't sure if promises were enough. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt like an eternity. David's hands trembled slightly as he clutched the folder containing documents that would either vindicate him or confirm Catherine's worst fears. Other employees nodded respectfully as they passed, unaware that the man they had come to respect as their director of international communications was fighting for his professional and personal survival. Catherine's office felt different when David entered at exactly 9 o'clock to back. The warmth that had developed between them over the past months was gone, replaced by the cool professionalism that she had wielded like armor during her early years as CEO. She sat behind her desk, Richard Blackwood's folder open in front of her, her face unreadable. "Sit down, David," she said without looking up. David took the chair across from her, the same seat where she had offered him his position as Director of International Communications. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had been promoted in this room, and now he might be destroyed in it. "I've spent the night reading through the accusations my father has made against you," Catherine began, her voice steady but cold. "I need you to respond to them, and I need you to be completely honest. Our professional relationship and everything else depends on your truthfulness." David nodded, steeling himself for the conversation he had been dreading. "Did your wife file for divorce before she died?" Catherine asked. "Yes," David said simply. "Maria filed papers 3 months before her death." Catherine's face tightened. "Were you abusive to her?" "No," David said firmly, "but I was. Lost. The medical bills were crushing us. I had lost my job and I was drinking too much. I was depressed, withdrawn, and probably not the husband she needed during the worst period of her life. She filed for divorce because she was dying and she wanted to protect me from inheriting her medical debt. Catherine looked up, surprised. What? Maria knew she was dying, Catherine. The divorce was her way of ensuring that her medical expenses wouldn't destroy Emma's future. She was trying to save us from financial ruin, even though it meant we couldn't be married when she died. David's voice broke slightly. I let her do it because I thought it was the right thing for Emma, but it meant I lost my wife twice, once to divorce and once to death. And it meant that to the outside world, it looked like I had abandoned her. Catherine's expression softened slightly, but she continued with her questions. The student complaint at Berkeley? David took a deep breath. A graduate student named Amanda Pierce accused me of sexual harassment after I gave her a failing grade on her thesis. She had been struggling academically and had made advances that I rebuffed. When she realized she wasn't going to pass, she filed a complaint claiming I had demanded sexual favors in exchange for grades. And the investigation found no evidence to support her claims. 2 other students came forward to testify that she had bragged about trying to seduce me and had become angry when I rejected her. But the accusation was enough to create a scandal. Combined with the budget cuts and my criticism of the university's diversity policies, it gave the administration the excuse they needed to eliminate my position. Catherine studied David's face, looking for signs of deception. Why didn't you tell me any of this? Because I was afraid, David admitted. I was afraid that if you knew about the messiness of my past, you wouldn't take a chance on me. I was afraid you'd see me as damaged goods rather than someone who had learned from his mistakes. And the drinking? David's composure cracked. I was an alcoholic, Catherine. For about 18 months after Maria's diagnosis, I used alcohol to numb the pain of watching my wife die and my career crumble. I attended AA meetings, got sober, and I've been clean for over 2 years. But yes, I was a drunk. I was a man who couldn't handle the pressures of his life, and I made terrible choices. Catherine leaned back in her chair, processing David's explanations. The man sitting across from her was revealing vulnerabilities that she had never suspected, admitting to failures that painted him as human rather than the almost perfect figure she had imagined him to be. David, she said quietly, why should I trust you now? If you were willing to omit these details about your past, what else haven't you told me? David met her eyes directly. Because everything I've done since I met you has been honest. Every success I've achieved for Morrison Technologies, every moment we've shared, every feeling I've expressed, all of it has been real. I didn't lie about my credentials or my abilities. I just didn't volunteer information about my lowest moments. My father says, you've been manipulating me, using Emma and your circumstances to gain my sympathy and advance your career. David's face hardened. Your father is a man who abandoned his own daughter and now wants to control her life. He's not concerned about protecting you, Catherine. He's concerned about something else entirely. What do you mean? Before David could answer, Catherine's assistant, Jennifer, appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Morrison, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's an urgent call from Children's Healthcare. It's about Emma Chen. David's blood turned to ice. What's wrong? The doctor says Emma has taken a turn for the worse. They need to move her surgery up to this afternoon. David stood, his personal crisis with Catherine suddenly secondary to his daughter's emergency. I have to go. David, wait, Catherine said. We're not finished. My daughter is dying, David said, his voice breaking. Whatever else is between us, Emma needs me now. Catherine watched David leave, her heart torn between her professional doubts and her personal feelings. She had fallen in love with a man who had just admitted to being a recovering alcoholic with a complicated past. But she had also seen him save her company, care for his daughter with absolute devotion, and treat her with a respect and kindness that had been missing from her life. Richard Blackwood had orchestrated this revelation to destroy David's credibility, but Catherine was beginning to suspect that her father's motivations were more complex than simple paternal protection. She sat alone in her office for 20 minutes, staring at the accusations spread across her desk. Part of her wanted to dismiss them entirely, to trust her instincts about David's character. But another part, the part that had learned to be suspicious of anyone who seemed too good to be true, whispered that maybe her father was right. Her phone buzzed with a text from David. Emma's surgery moved to 2 p.m. She's asking for you. I know you have reasons not to trust me, but please don't punish her for my failures. Catherine stared at the message, remembering Emma's bright smile and the way the little girl had accepted her as part of their family. Whatever doubts she had about David, Emma was innocent. She grabbed her purse and headed for the hospital, her mind churning with questions and possibilities. During the drive through Atlanta traffic, she found herself thinking about the man she had come to love. David had saved her company, yes, but he had also saved her from the loneliness that had consumed her for years. He had shown her that success meant nothing without someone to share it with. But if even part of what her father had told her was true, then everything she believed about David was built on a foundation of omissions and half-truths. At Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, David sat in the surgical waiting room, his hands shaking as he signed consent forms for Emma's emergency heart procedure. The surgery that had been scheduled for next week had become critical after Emma's condition deteriorated overnight. "Mr. Chen, doctor," Martinez explained, "Emma's heart valve is failing more rapidly than we anticipated. The surgery is more complex now, but we have the best pediatric cardiac team in the Southeast. She's going to be fine." David nodded, trying to process the medical terminology through his fear. Emma had been his anchor, his reason for surviving the darkest periods of his life. The thought of losing her was unbearable. "The procedure will take approximately 4 hours," Dr. Martinez continued. "We'll be replacing the damaged valve with a mechanical one, which should give Emma a completely normal life expectancy. There are risks, of course. But the alternative is—" "I understand," David said, his voice barely a whisper. "Papa," Emma said weakly as they wheeled her toward the operating room, "is Miss Catherine coming?" "I don't know, Mija," David said, kissing her forehead. "But you're going to be brave, and when you wake up, everything will be better." "I love you, Papa." "I love you too, Emma, more than all the stars in the sky." As the surgical team took Emma away, David collapsed into a waiting room chair, overwhelmed by the complexity of his situation. His daughter was having emergency surgery, the woman he loved was questioning everything she thought she knew about him, and his professional future was uncertain. He was alone in the way he had been after Maria's death, facing a crisis that threatened to destroy everything he held dear. The waiting room was filled with other families dealing with their own medical crises, but David felt isolated in his fear and uncertainty. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through pictures of Emma, her first day of school, her 7th birthday party, the moment she had met Catherine for the first time. Each image reminded him of how much he had to lose. Then he heard familiar footsteps in the hallway. Catherine Morrison appeared in the waiting room doorway, her face pale but determined. She had changed from her business suit into jeans and a sweater, and she carried a small teddy bear. "How is she?" Catherine asked, sitting beside David. "Surgery will take 4 hours," David said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "The doctors say she'll be fine, but you're terrified," Catherine finished. "I understand." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of their unfinished conversation hanging between them. Catherine studied David's profile, seeing the exhaustion and fear that he was trying to hide. Whatever questions she had about his past, there was no doubt about his love for Emma. "David," she said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest." David nodded, bracing himself. "Do you love me, or have you been using me to secure your future?" David turned to face her fully, his eyes red with unshed tears. "Catherine, I fell in love with you the first night we worked together, not because you were my boss or because you could advance my career, but because you saw something in me that I had lost sight of in myself. You gave me back my dignity, my purpose, and my hope. I love you because you're brilliant, compassionate, and strong enough to build an empire while still caring about the people who work for you." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "My father says—" "Your father is lying," David interrupted, "and I think I know why." "What do you mean?" David took a deep breath. "Catherine, have you ever wondered why Richard Blackwood suddenly appeared just as we defeated Harrison Industries? Why he had such detailed information about my past? Why he seemed so determined to destroy our relationship?" Catherine frowned. "He said he was protecting me." "He was protecting himself," David said. "Think about it. Who benefits if Morrison Technologies fails? Who would profit from our company's destruction?" Catherine's face went pale as the implications hit her. "You think my father is connected to Harrison Industries?" I think your father is Harrison Industries, David said. Or at least, he's the major investor behind their takeover attempt. When we defeated them through international partnerships, he lost millions. Destroying my credibility was his way of undermining the foundation of our success. Catherine stared at David, her mind racing. But why would he? Because he's a businessman, Catherine. He sees opportunities, and he takes them. The fact that his own daughter built something successful just made it a more attractive target. Before Catherine could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed her father's name. Answer it, David said, but put it on speaker. Catherine hesitated, then accepted the call. Hello, Dad. Catherine, I trust you've made the right decision about your employee situation. Richard's voice was cold and businesslike. Actually, I have some questions about your motivations, Catherine said. What do you mean? I mean, why are you so invested in destroying David? What do you gain from breaking up our relationship? Richard's laugh was harsh. Catherine, you've always been naive about people's true motivations. That man has been playing you from the beginning, and you're too blinded by emotion to see it. Or maybe you're the one who's been playing me, Catherine said, her voice growing stronger. Tell me, Dad, how much money did you lose when Harrison Industries failed to acquire Morrison Technologies? The silence on the other end of the line was telling. I don't know what you're talking about, Richard said finally. Don't you? Catherine stood, beginning to pace. David thinks you were the primary investor behind Harrison's takeover attempt. That would explain why you have such detailed information about his past, why you appeared at exactly the right moment to sow doubt, and why you're so determined to destroy our relationship. You're being ridiculous. Am I? Because it all makes sense now. You saw Morrison Technologies as a target, invested millions in Harrison Industries' takeover attempt, and when that failed, you decided to try a more personal approach. Destroy my relationship with David, undermine my confidence, and maybe I'd make some poor business decisions that would devalue the company. David watched Catherine with growing admiration. She was putting the pieces together, seeing through her father's manipulation with the same sharp intelligence that had built her company. Catherine, Richard's voice was now cold with anger. You're making a serious mistake. That man is not who you think he is. You're right, Catherine said. He's not perfect. He's made mistakes, struggled with addiction, and had his career destroyed by circumstances beyond his control. But he's also honest, courageous, and loving. He's the man who saved my company and showed me what it means to have a real partner. If you choose him over family, I am choosing family, Catherine interrupted. I'm choosing the family I built with David and Emma over the father who abandoned me 20 years ago and only reappeared when he saw an opportunity to profit from my success. She ended the call and turned to David, who was staring at her with a mixture of love and amazement. Catherine, he said softly, you just burned a bridge with your father for me. No, she said, sitting back down beside him. I burned a bridge with a man who's been trying to manipulate me. My real family is right here in this hospital waiting room. Before David could respond, Dr. Martinez appeared in the doorway. Mr. Chen, Mrs. Morrison, Emma's surgery was successful. She's in recovery now, and she's asking for both of you. David and Catherine rushed to the recovery room, where Emma lay surrounded by monitors and IV lines, but her eyes were bright and alert. Papa, Miss Catherine, you're both here. We're both here, sweetheart, Catherine said, kissing Emma's forehead. How are you feeling? Better, Emma said. The doctors fixed my heart. But Papa, why do you look so sad? David struggled for words. Papa and Miss Catherine are working through some grown-up problems, Mija. Emma looked seriously at both of them. Are you going to stop being a family? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Catherine felt the weight of her decision. She could walk away, protect herself from the complexity of loving a man with a complicated past, or she could trust her instincts and fight for the family she had found. No, Catherine said firmly. We're not going to stop being a family. David's eyes filled with tears of relief. Catherine, we'll figure out the rest later, she said. Right now, Emma needs us both. As they stood together in the recovery room, David realized that their greatest test wasn't the hostile takeover or the accusations about his past. It was learning to trust each other completely, to build a relationship on honesty rather than perfection. But their moment of peace was about to be shattered by a revelation that would expose the true extent of Richard Blackwood's manipulation and force them to fight for their future in ways they had never imagined. Over the next 2 days, while Emma recovered from her surgery, David and Catherine took turns staying at the hospital. During the quiet hours, they talked more honestly than they ever had before. David shared the full story of his marriage to Maria, his descent into alcoholism, and his struggle to rebuild his life after losing everything. "I was a different person then," David said during one of their late-night conversations. "The drinking, the depression, the inability to handle pressure, that was a man who had given up on himself. Meeting you, getting this opportunity, it gave me back my purpose." Catherine listened without judgment, seeing the pain in his eyes but also the strength that had carried him through his darkest moments. "I understand why you didn't tell me everything," she said. "I probably would have made the same choice. But David, if we're going to build a future together, we need complete honesty. No more omissions, no more protecting each other from difficult truths." "Agreed," David said. "But Catherine, there's something else we need to discuss. Your father isn't going to give up. If he's really behind Harrison Industries' takeover attempt, he's lost millions because of our success. He's going to try again." Catherine nodded grimly. "I've been thinking about that. We need to be prepared for whatever he does next." Their preparation proved prescient. On the morning Catherine returned to Morrison Technologies, she found her father waiting in her office. Richard Blackwood sat behind her desk, a stack of legal documents spread before him, his expression coldly triumphant. "Catherine," he said without preamble, "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about your future." "Get out from behind my desk," Catherine said, her voice icy with controlled anger. Richard smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm afraid I can't do that. You see, I own 47% of Morrison Technologies. I've been quietly buying shares through shell companies for the past 6 months." Catherine felt the blood drain from her face. "That's impossible." "Is it?" Richard pulled out a folder of stock certificates. "I've been very patient, Catherine. I watched you build this company, waiting for the right moment to become involved. The Harrison Industries takeover was my first attempt to gain control. When your janitor boyfriend managed to defeat that strategy, I decided on a more direct approach. You can't own 47% without disclosure requirements. I can when the purchases are made through 12 different offshore companies, none of which individually own more than 5%. It's perfectly legal, and it makes me the largest single shareholder in your company." Catherine sank into the chair across from her own desk, overwhelmed by the scope of her father's betrayal. "Why? Why would you do this to me?" "Because you're my daughter, and I refuse to watch you waste your potential on sentiment and emotion. Morrison Technologies has the foundation to become a truly dominant force in the technology sector, but it needs proper leadership. Leadership that isn't distracted by romantic relationships with employees. You're trying to force me out of my own company." "I'm trying to force you to grow up," Richard said coldly. "Fire David Chen, end this ridiculous personal relationship, and focus on building the empire you're capable of creating. Do that, and I'll remain a silent partner. Refuse, and I'll call for a board meeting to remove you as CEO." Catherine's hands shook with rage. "You bastard! You calculated, manipulative bastard. I'm a businessman, Catherine. I see opportunities, and I take them. You've built something remarkable here, but you're about to destroy it with your emotions. David Chen is a liability, a man with a questionable past who has far too much influence over your decision-making. David saved this company. David got lucky. But luck runs out, and when it does, you'll be left with a man who's already proven he can't be trusted with the truth. Fire him, Catherine. Choose your company over your heart." Catherine stood, her decision crystallizing. "No." "No?" I said no. "I won't fire David. I won't end our relationship. And I won't let you destroy what we've built together. You may own 47% of Morrison Technologies, but I own 53%. You can't force me out without a majority vote." Richard's smile widened. "Actually, I can. You see, I've been in communication with several board members who share my concerns about your judgment. Harold Winters, Patricia Goldman, and Michael Torres have all agreed that new leadership might be necessary." Catherine's heart sank. Those 3 board members, combined with Richard's stock holdings, would have enough power to remove her as CEO. "The board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning," Richard continued. "You have until then to reconsider your position, fire David Chen, and you can remain as CEO under my guidance." Keep him, and you'll be voted out by noon. As Richard left her office, Catherine realized that the battle for Morrison Technologies was far from over. Her father had played a longer game than she had imagined, and now she faced a choice that would determine not just her professional future, but the fate of everyone she cared about. She called David immediately. "Catherine?" His voice was worried. "Is everything okay?" "We need to talk," she said. "My father has made his move, and it's worse than we thought." That evening, in David's apartment while Emma slept in her room, Catherine explained the full scope of Richard's manipulation. David listened in stunned silence as she detailed the stock purchases, the board member conspiracies, and the ultimatum that would force her to choose between her company and their relationship. "He's been planning this for months," Catherine said, pacing David's small living room. "Every move, every strategy, all designed to give him control over Morrison Technologies. And if you choose me, you lose everything you've built," David said quietly. "If I choose you, I lose the company but keep my soul," Catherine corrected. "If I choose the company, I become my father's puppet and lose the best thing that's ever happened to me." David stood, taking her hands in his. "Catherine, you can't sacrifice your life's work for me. Morrison Technologies is more than a company. It's your legacy, your contribution to the world. 4,000 people depend on it for their livelihoods. And what about Emma? What about us? What about the family we've built?" David's eyes filled with tears. "We'll find another way. There has to be another solution." Catherine kissed him softly. "There is. But it requires us to take the biggest risk of our lives." "What do you mean?" Catherine smiled, and for the first time in days, David saw the fierce determination that had built Morrison Technologies from nothing. "I mean, we're going to beat my father at his own game, but we're going to need help." "What kind of help?" "The kind that comes from people who understand what Richard Blackwood really is," Catherine said. "David, I need you to call your sister-in-law Sarah, the one who works for the SEC. David's eyes widened. "Catherine, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that if your father-in-law is willing to use illegal methods to gain control of my company, then we need to expose him for what he really is. But I need an expert to help us prove it." David pulled out his phone. "Sarah's going to want to know everything. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny?" "I'm prepared for whatever it takes to save Morrison Technologies and protect our family," Catherine said. "Make the call." Sarah Chen arrived in Atlanta the next morning, her briefcase full of investigative tools and her expression grim with purpose. As a former SEC investigator turned private consultant, she had seen every kind of corporate fraud and manipulation imaginable. "David told me about your situation," she said, settling into Catherine's office. "If what you suspect is true, Richard Blackwood has committed multiple federal crimes. But we need proof." "What kind of proof?" Catherine asked. "Financial records, communication logs, anything that shows coordination between Blackwood and Harrison Industries. The timing of his stock purchases, evidence of insider trading, proof of the bribes he offered to your board members." Catherine's heart sank. "I don't have access to any of that information." Sarah smiled grimly. "But I do. Give me 6 hours and access to your financial systems, and I'll give you everything you need to destroy him." As Sarah worked, David and Catherine prepared for the board meeting that would determine their future. The atmosphere in Morrison Technologies was tense, with employees sensing that something significant was about to happen. "Whatever happens today," David said, "I want you to know that meeting you changed my life in ways I never imagined possible." "Don't talk like this is goodbye," Catherine said. "We're going to win this." "Are we?" "Because right now, it looks like your father holds all the cards." Catherine took David's hands, her eyes blazing with determination. "David, I've spent my entire career underestimating myself and letting other people define my worth. But you taught me something important, that success isn't about what you accomplish alone, it's about what you build with the people you trust." "Catherine, I'm not finished. You stepped into that conference room 6 months ago and saved my company, but you also saved me. You showed me that I didn't have to choose between professional success and personal happiness. You proved that the best partnerships are built on trust, respect, and shared values." David felt tears streaming down his face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that whatever happens in that boardroom today, we face it together. And if we lose Morrison Technologies, then we'll build something new together, something that's truly ours." Before David could respond, Sarah appeared in the doorway, her expression triumphant. "I found everything," she said, holding up a thick folder. "Richard Blackwood is about to have a very bad day." The next morning, the Morrison Technologies boardroom was packed with shareholders, board members, and media representatives who had gotten wind of the leadership crisis. Richard Blackwood sat at the head of the table, confident in his victory, while Catherine and David took seats across from him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to controlling corporate meetings, "we're here today to address serious concerns about the current leadership of Morrison Technologies. Recent events have raised questions about CEO Catherine Morrison's judgment and decision-making capabilities." He gestured dismissively toward David. "The promotion of an unqualified employee to a senior position, the romantic entanglement that has compromised professional objectivity, and the questionable partnerships that have put the company at risk, all of these issues demonstrate a pattern of poor judgment that threatens the future of Morrison Technologies." Several board members nodded in agreement, and Catherine felt her stomach tighten. Her father's manipulation had been thorough and effective. "Therefore," Richard continued, "I am calling for a vote of no confidence in Catherine Morrison's leadership. It's time for new management that will prioritize shareholder value over personal relationships." Catherine stood, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. "Before we proceed with any vote, I'd like to introduce someone who has information relevant to these proceedings." The boardroom doors opened and Sarah Chen entered, carrying a briefcase and wearing the determined expression of someone who had fought long battles in corporate boardrooms. "This is Sarah Chen," Catherine announced. "She's a former SEC investigator and David's sister-in-law. She's been researching the stock purchases that gave Richard Blackwood his shareholding in Morrison Technologies." Richard's face went pale. "Catherine, what are you doing?" Sarah stepped forward, her voice clear and professional. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to report that Richard Blackwood has violated numerous SEC regulations in his acquisition of Morrison Technologies stock. The shell companies he used to hide his purchases were not properly disclosed, and several of the transactions involved insider trading based on confidential information about the company's international expansion plans." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "I have evidence that Mr. Blackwood used his daughter's personal information to time his stock purchases, giving him an unfair advantage over other investors. This constitutes securities fraud, and I've already filed a complaint with the SEC." The boardroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Richard stood, his composure cracking for the first time. "This is ridiculous. I've done nothing illegal." "Haven't you?" Sarah continued, her voice growing stronger. "You also conspired with Harrison Industries to manipulate Morrison Technologies' stock price during the takeover attempt. You provided them with insider information about the company's financial position and strategic plans. That's securities fraud, Mr. Blackwood." Sarah pulled out a series of documents. "These are phone records showing extensive communication between you and Harrison Industries executives during the takeover attempt. These are financial records showing that you were the primary investor in Harrison's acquisition fund. And these are emails between you and Harrison's legal team discussing strategies to devalue Morrison Technologies' stock price to make the takeover more attractive." Catherine felt a surge of triumph as she watched her father's carefully constructed plan crumble. The board members who had been prepared to support him were now looking at him with suspicion and alarm. "Furthermore," Sarah said, "the board members who agreed to support Mr. Blackwood's attempt to remove Catherine Morrison as CEO were offered significant financial incentives. Harold Winters, Patricia Goldman, and Michael Torres all received consulting contracts with Blackwood Industries in exchange for their votes." The three board members in question went pale, realizing that their corruption had been exposed. David stood, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had found his true calling. "Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Blackwood didn't try to acquire Morrison Technologies to protect his daughter or improve the company. He tried to steal it because he saw an opportunity to profit from our success. When legal methods failed, he resorted to manipulation, fraud, and bribery." Catherine stepped forward, her voice filled with the passion that had built her company. "Morrison Technologies has always been about more than profit. It's about recognizing potential, building partnerships, and creating opportunities for everyone who works here. My father represents everything we stand against the idea that success is about taking rather than building, about controlling rather than empowering." Richard's face was red with rage. Catherine, you're making a terrible mistake. You're choosing sentiment over business sense. No, Dad, Catherine said, using the word for the first time in years. I'm choosing integrity over corruption. I'm choosing love over manipulation. I'm choosing the future over the past. Sarah presented additional evidence, including records of bribes paid to board members and documentation of Richard's attempts to manipulate Morrison Technologies' international partnerships. The scope of his corruption was staggering, involving millions of dollars in illegal transactions and conspiracy charges that would likely result in federal prison time. The board voted unanimously to reject Richard's attempt to remove Catherine as CEO. They also voted to immediately remove Harold Winters, Patricia Goldman, and Michael Torres from their positions and to cooperate fully with the SEC investigation. As the boardroom cleared, Catherine and David stood together, having survived the greatest test of their relationship in their company. Richard Blackwood was led away by federal agents, his empire of corruption finally exposed. "How did you know about Sarah?" David asked as they watched the media circus unfold outside. Catherine smiled. "I didn't. But I knew you had family somewhere, and I figured if your sister-in-law was anything like you, she'd be someone worth knowing. I called her yesterday and explained the situation. She flew in from San Francisco this morning." David shook his head in amazement. "You risked everything on a guess?" "I risked everything on trust," Catherine corrected. "I trusted you, I trusted your family, and I trusted that love is stronger than greed." In the weeks that followed, Morrison Technologies flourished under the renewed leadership of Catherine and David. The international partnerships that David had cultivated continued to grow, and the company's reputation for integrity and innovation attracted new clients and investors. Emma recovered fully from her surgery, returning to school with a mechanical heart valve that would allow her to live a completely normal life. She delighted in telling her classmates about her robot heart and how her father and stepmother had saved their company from the bad man. Richard Blackwood was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for securities fraud, conspiracy, and bribery. The 3 board members who had accepted his bribes received lesser sentences but were permanently barred from serving on corporate boards. 6 months after the board meeting that had nearly destroyed them, Catherine Morrison and David Chen were married in a ceremony held in the Morrison Technologies headquarters lobby. Emma, fully recovered from her surgery, served as the flower girl, while employees from every level of the company attended the reception. Mr. Yamamoto and Mr. Kim flew in from Asia to celebrate with the couple, who had shown them that American business could be built on relationships and trust rather than pure profit motivation. The wedding was covered by business media as a symbol of the new corporate culture that prioritized people over profits. During their wedding dance, Catherine whispered to David, "Do you ever regret that night when you stepped into the conference room?" David looked at Emma, who was dancing with Dr. Martinez and his wife, then at the employees who had become their extended family. "Never," he said. "That was the night I stopped being invisible and started being myself. And now I'm the luckiest man in the world. I have a daughter who thinks I'm a hero, a wife who sees the best in everyone, and a job that lets me build bridges between people and cultures." Catherine smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought them from crisis to love. "What do you think comes next?" David spun her around the dance floor, surrounded by the people who had become their family. "I think we build something beautiful together. Something that lasts." As the evening wound down, Emma ran up to her father and new stepmother. "Papa, Miss Catherine, I mean, Mama Catherine can we have a baby brother or sister?" David and Catherine exchanged glances, both thinking of the future they were building together. "We'll see, Mija," David said. "We'll see." The honeymoon took them to Japan, where they combined business with pleasure, visiting Yamamoto Industries and exploring the cultural sites that had inspired David's love of international communication. Emma joined them for the second week, her first trip outside the United States, and her wonder at experiencing a different culture reminded both David and Catherine of the importance of building bridges between people. Upon their return to Atlanta, they found that Morrison Technologies had been selected as one of the best companies to work for by several national publications. The company's commitment to recognizing talent regardless of background, its employee profit-sharing program, and its innovative approach to international partnerships had attracted attention from business schools and management consultants. David was invited to speak at conferences about cultural sensitivity in international business, while Catherine was recognized as one of the top female CEOs by Fortune magazine. But their greatest pride came from the culture they had built at Morrison Technologies, a company where a janitor could become a director, where talent was recognized regardless of its source, and where success was measured not just in profits, but in the positive impact on employees and communities. 1 year after their wedding, Catherine and David welcomed their first child together, a son they named Michael, after David's father who had died when David was young. Emma was thrilled to be a big sister, and she took her role seriously, helping with feedings and reading stories to her baby brother. The Morrison Chen family had become a symbol of the American dream, evolved not just the story of individual success, but of the power of recognizing potential in others and building something meaningful together. Their story was featured in business magazines, academic case studies, and inspirational books about corporate leadership. But for David and Catherine, the greatest success was the family they had built together. Emma thrived in her new school, her heart condition now just a small part of her medical history. Michael grew surrounded by love and the knowledge that he was part of something special. And David and Catherine continued to build Morrison Technologies into a company that proved business could be both profitable and humane. 5 years after David had first stepped into that conference room, Morrison Technologies had expanded to 32 countries, employed over 12,000 people, and was recognized as one of the most innovative and ethical companies in the technology sector. The international partnerships that had saved the company from Richard Blackwood's manipulation had grown into a global network of collaboration and mutual respect. David's role had evolved from Director of International Communications to Chief Strategy Officer, while Catherine continued as CEO, their partnership stronger than ever. They had proven that love and business success were not mutually exclusive, that trust and integrity could be the foundation of both personal and professional achievement. On a quiet evening in their Atlanta home, as Emma helped Michael with his homework and Catherine reviewed business plans for their expansion into South America, David reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From invisible janitor to corporate executive, from lonely bachelor to devoted husband and father, from man who had lost everything to someone who had found more than he ever dreamed possible. Outside their windows, Atlanta sparkled in the darkness, a city full of dreams and possibilities. Inside, a family born from crisis and strengthened by love prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that together they could overcome anything. The story of Morrison Technologies would continue, but it would always be guided by the principles that had brought them together. The recognition that talent exists everywhere, that success is meaningless without love, and that the greatest achievements come from lifting others up rather than climbing over them. In the end, David Chen had done the impossible not just by saving a company or winning the heart of a remarkable woman, but by proving that courage, integrity, and love can triumph over even the most calculated attempts to destroy them. The millionaire CEO and the janitor had found each other in a moment of crisis, and together they had built something that would last forever. Their legacy would be measured not just in profits and market share, but in the lives they had touched, the opportunities they had created, and the proof that the American dream was still alive for those brave enough to reach for it and generous enough to share it with others.